here we have it. The Trek Project 1 Flame Ultraman frame is ready. And I went ahead and ordered some parts because it had a mix match set, so it needed a new front derailleur. So I got a derailleur to be a braze-on. That took a little squirrely mess, but I got also a rear derailleur, new out of the deal. Also, it had brakes I wanted to match, so I ordered all this. So I got that. Also the bottom bracket, the current one that was on there was kind of funky, so I went and got a new one in there. So it has the ULTEGRA shifters. So all this matches. And I also got the wheels. They're all true and ready to go. And also have the crank. What? Didn't those just get recalled? Oh man. Crap. Let's go over this. Welcome to I Know a Guy Bicycles.
Welcome to I Know a Guy Bicycles, hanging out with the guy. Hi, I'm Justin, the guy. Obviously, I have a garage shop. Taking scary how to use bikes one bike at a time.
If you like these videos, please like and subscribe. Welcome back to I Know a Guy Bicycles, hanging out with the guy. Hey, I'm Justin the guy, and we are looking at this Project 1 on this old bike series. So, you know, I picked up this Project 1 and it had mismatched parts with tagger shifters, and you watched the previous video of this, and I detailed the frame, and I decided to order some parts. And I was like, okay, I was going to make a video of installing new parts and kind of the experience of going through this bike to get it up to more of a congealed one of a, you know, matchy basically, right? So I ordered, you know, some shifters. Had like the one I had was a clamp on. This is a braze-on frame, so I had to do a braze-on there. And when I ordered that, they sent me a rear derailleur by accident. So anywho, I got a new derailleur to go on this one. Also the used one I have on like Facebook Marketplace, whatever, and put the new on this guy. So, and also like, well, you know, brakes are not too expensive, so I went ahead and got ULTEGRA brakes to go on this guy as well, which is great. And in the process of all that, I had the shifters and the wheel set. And lo and behold, Bicycle Retail released a Shimano recall notice on ULTEGRA DURA-ACE 11-speed crankset. So yeah, I got this crankset. It was off of a, it's used lightly. I was put on a bike, built up, ridden maybe like 100 miles, then put away. And I took the parts off to swap the parts out to make a more vintage original bike. And that was the titanium bike I had, the Fuji. So I put all DURA-ACE vintage to match that. And I took the newer stuff that the guy put on there, and I was going to put it on this guy. Well, out of all this time, and it's taken several months to get around to it because I have all this other stuff going on, kind of, in a sense, glad that I didn't put this on a bike and send it out the door, because it's under recall. And the recall basically is, it's 11-speed ULTEGRA and DURA-ACE. I'll have a link below with all the model numbers and date codes on there as well. What I'm getting at, even though this looks pretty much brand new, it may fail. That's where it comes to the point of like, well, I'm not going to pass on anything knowledge-wise, knowingly, to offer anyone, even though it's like, well, inspect, blah, blah, blah. No. If you had a history of failing cranksets, and it's whatever this recall. So I'm going to take you on a little journey, and I'm going to be taking this to my local Shimano dealer, which is the Trek store. And I've worked with those guys in the past, and they're going to be pretty, hopefully straight up legit, telling me what they know and what they expect and what I should expect out of this. So anywho, we are going to take this crankset, put it back in the box, which I actually do have the original box that it came in from the individual that put this together. He had the boxes for it, so if I know how to put this back in there correctly-ish. Here it goes this way. And yeah, and I got a bottom bracket for it to work a little bit better. Yeah, those are like, you know, Pandora's box when you pull these things apart. So I was like, how's this all fit in here? So anyway, yeah, I think that's good enough. So we're going to be taking this down to the store. And, you know, I don't have the original receipt to this, but it's one of those things where the recall covers or should cover regardless. Well, what's the beef of the recall? Well, this recall has been going on for years, and, well, the recall hasn't been gone for years. The part has been out for years. We're talking like 8 years or something like that, and they just now decided to do the recall, and it's like 270 or 470 or a million cranks that have been affected. So yeah, I have the crankset, actual original sticker, where it's by a bike barn. I believe that's in Texas. So anywho, here's the weird beef of this thing, is if you bought a bike and that a few years back, let's say 7 years ago, you know, it's 11 speed, newer stuff, you ride it, you're an avid rider, you're hardcore, and your crank fails after maybe 2 years and 3 years of riding. The warranties, mostly in componentry, is only a year. Well, then you're going to automatically think, well, you know, I crashed it or whatever, it broke, it failed, it's past the warranty, I'm just going to go buy a new crankset, maybe a different brand, and just continue, you know, riding and so forth. Well, a crankset, that is one of your 3 contact points, right? If that fails, you're going down. I mean, it's like your leg slides right off. It's just, it's usually under a lot of load to your climbing, so you could actually fall and hurt yourself. So there lies the really question of all of this. Is like, okay, I understand they found out, they got enough information to do the recall or whatever, it's very corporate, whatever. But the problem is, I would see with a lot of customers that may have replaced their crankset, not been reported, so the numbers are not even reflecting close to what actually has probably happened from injury, in addition to how many cranks that actually did fail. It's like, oh, they broke, you just get a new, you know, buy a new set, and they just made them a wall ornament or whatever. So that's one kind of backlash you're going to see from a lot of people. Once this becomes a little more known, it's like, oh wait, that bike I rode 10 years ago, crank failed on it, replaced it, and by then I sold it, and now I'm like, well, I had to go through this whole experience and it wasn't covered, and now they're finally getting around to covering it. Well, I mean, better late than never, right? But, you know, it's one of those situations where, are they going to go back, and if anybody had some really original receipts, like, hey, I paid another $300 or whatever to get this fixed, that kind of thing? Probably not. In the case, what I've heard so far, we'll find out exactly what the replacement's going to be, that kind of deal, or if they're even going to do it at all. Because what I've seen out there so far, it's been kind of like, you know, if it makes noise, then whatever. It's like, come on, you know, it's one of those situations like, if it fails, it fails. It's questionable, it fails. Don't put yourself at risk. That's where we're going to be at. So let's just take this down to the shop and see what happens. I don't know if I'll be able to get the recording inside the store, that kind of thing, but I will definitely report after this experience and see what they told me. And we'll go from there. But anywho, here we are. Pardon the interruption, there is more. More, you say? Push the more button. Push it. Push it. I dare you to push it. Once you push that button, you get more details about the video you are watching, in addition to all the tools that I use in the shop, as well as suggestion for improving your ride. In addition to help me provide advocacy in the cycling community, also links to other social media accounts as well as my website to find the products I actually sell and other insights in the industry. Other videos linked below. Extend your cycling experience here on YouTube. And now back to your original programming. Well, I made the journey. Went down to the local bike shop, and trek store in my case, that is a Shimano authorized dealer, had them inspect. So let's go over the process. And it is not as scary-ish, more than annoyance, really. You know, it's a voluntary recall. What they mean by that is one of those things is voluntary on them, in a sense, because they're not going to recall all the cranks. They are expecting about 1% of the 740,000 of those cranks produced in the US, the DURA-ACE and ULTEGRA, to be affected. So 1% of 740,000 cranks is pretty low percentage. That's if the numbers is that true. But in any case, pretty much any other part on your bike has that percentage anyway, regardless of who made it. I mean, that's just odds, right? So anyway, so the process. Actually, the process is not too bad, quite honestly. You find your local Shimano dealer, and then you take your crankset or your bike, preferably the bike, in, and they will check and see if there's any kind of funky shifting or the crank is, you know, chain rings rubbing in the front derailleur, that kind of thing, and they'll do an inspection. Well, the silver lining of this, in a sense, if there is for the shops, is they do get a credit per crankset they inspect, and the cranksets are serialized so they can actually log all of those. So that's the good news. So you're not really putting them out, but please don't be killing the messenger. They are just there to execute what Shimano has to do for this voluntary recall. So first you need to identify the crank, and you do that by the model, the FC-R8000 or 6800, I think it is, another one. And then there is also a 2-letter date code, and that'll be on the link below, or what you just saw. And you identify if that's affected, then okay, then that particular crank. So here's the history on this. These cranks are in production for over 7 years. They stopped production on them. Well, you know, they stopped that range of production a couple years ago when they went to 12-speed, right? So there's a lot of these out there. And what they do to inspect, well, before with that, let's go over that this particular crank. You want to identify it, then you take it in. It takes them a day or two to take it apart, and they need to take it apart. And then once it's inspected, if it's fine, then you're good to go. But let's take a look what they do. When they are actually taking these apart, you got to take the chain rings off. And what they're looking for is this seam that goes all the way around the particular crank itself. And they're inspecting and making sure there's no gaps or any compromise. So this one actually was approved that it's fine. Well, so with ULTEGRA, it's just the drive side. The DURA-ACE is also the drive side as well as the non-drive side, and that's where they're looking for the delamination. So you got to take the chain rings off, and you got to use a Torx wrench to get these screws off, which is not too terrible. And if I read this right, I can't read it right. It's T3, I believe, 4 bolts, and the back sides are actually fixed into the actual chain ring itself. So that's what they're doing for inspection. Still recommended to take it to your shop to have that done. Reason being, it gets categorized, it gets, you know, reported to Shimano with that serial number, which is actually based on the frame or somewhere on here, yeah, macro. But there's a serial number on all these cranks. So that case being said, that, you know, it's logged, it's taken care of in that aspect. So this is a good crank. There's a good chance that it may not fall apart. There's just that 1% that they're worried about. I'm not going to go into that, but what we're going to talk about is, well, the next question is, should I feel comfortable buying a bike that has these? Well, if they've been inspected, they'll get a receipt from the shop saying it's been inspected. So if you're looking at used, ask for that receipt, and also get a picture. See if they can give you a picture of the numbers here so you can cross-reference if it's one that's been affected. If you're selling a bike that has that, have that receipt available to show that it has been inspected and it's ready to go. It's probably going to be just fine because of the percentages are pretty low. So that being said, at first I was really like, oh my goodness, I don't want to be here. But you know, one of those things is, you know, well, it's just, you got the risk anyway. There's always a risk in cycling. That's what we're looking at in general. So the other bad news is, well, how often should have these checked? Well, we're still at the really early stages of this. The guys at the shop are like, maybe every 3 months, actually 6 months if you're riding a lot, and you know, with your annual tune-up. So here's the thing. If you have your bike annually tuned up, you have these cranks, make sure you take to a shop that is a Shimano certified so they can inspect that. That also gives the bike shop a little money kickback for doing that process, so it helps them out a little bit. But at the end of the day, yeah, you're going to have to, with these, DURA-ACE going to have these inspected by taking it apart like so and checking those seams to make sure they're not delaminating. What you're going to notice when it does start delaminating is this chain ring is no longer going to be completely straight. It's going to be popping out a little bit, bumping up against your front derailleur. That's going to be the first indication that you're having an issue on that. Full failures were not been reported yet as common, so that's good. So it has like these pre-indicators, like, okay, something's not right, take it to your shop, they inspect it, it's delaminated, and you're going to get a new crankset. Here's the problem. In this particular case, this just released. If you're watching this video, it might be later on, but currently right now, this just released. The replacement ones are not available. What they're going to be replacing them with is a 12-speed crankset with 11-ring chain rings specifically designed for that 12-speed crankset. Okay, you know where I'm going with this. Yeah, you get a new crankset, but you're going to be pigeonholed to that specific chain rings from here on out. 12 crank, 11-speed chain rings, specific chain rings for those. There lies, as I understand it, there lies the weird issue. Good thing though, you don't really wear these out very often anyway, so that's at least not too bad. If you do proper maintenance, lubing your drivetrain, if you use the waxes out there, that will save you from extra wear and tear on those chain rings as well. So you can still feel confident in the newer ones that are being replaced with. And even with the older ones, you want to just, you know, do those preventative maintenance too anyway. So when you're looking at that, yeah, it's an added little pain point, but if you're an average rider, you take it in once a year, have it tuned up, and if you have a drivetrain clean done, which most cases you probably will, they'll do the inspection, which is just safety on safety. So anywho, that aspect's not too bad. Here's the other tricky bit. These have been out for a 7-year block of production, and it's been a few years back, so you're looking about 10 years or so back in time. Woo. Well, what if you're a cat individual that bought a bike, let's say 7 years ago, so it'll be through 2-3 years into this thing, and the HOLLOWTECH went down 11 speed into the ULTEGRA. You got yourself a nice ULTEGRA bike. It's 11 speed with this crankset. You ride, and you ride it for a few years, and all of a sudden it delaminates and breaks, or you have a crash and it pops, or whatever the case may be. And you feel like, well, it's out of warranty. The shop's like, it's out of warranty depending on the shop. And then you're like, okay, I have to buy a new crankset. You either replaced it with a new one of those, or you got it a different brand. But you paid for that, right? Okay, so unfortunately, Shimano's not going to go back and go, oh, show me your receipt, whatever. But although, if you still have your broken crank that has this number on there, you can still go in and go, okay, I want my replacement now. So you can at least get a crank out of it, but that doesn't mean that they're going to reimburse you for the one that you already replaced it with. So unfortunately, that's the big sting of this if you've already been affected. But if you have been affected and you swap that crank out and you still have the crank as a wall ornament, which some, you know, people do like myself, if I break something, like, I'm gonna put it somewhere cool because I broke this, you know, whatever. Then you can take this in and then it can get recorded and it goes into that pool of recording. Hopefully you did not get injured, and there lies maybe a liability somewhere in there, but you're gonna have to have proof. If it was that crank and all those things, I'm not going there, but just saying that's gonna be one of those tricky bits that, you know, all major all companies are going to have to deal with. So for me, looking at used bikes and refurbishing used bikes, obviously I'm going to be looking for those particular cranks, and if I do find one, I'm going to, you know, see if the sellers had it already checked. If not, I'm going to have to take the bearer of the time to go down and have it checked to make sure it's still safe to ride. And again, it's only 1% of 740,000 cranksets that are produced. So that's a pretty low percentage, but they're trying, I mean, they could be just trying to making it soft, but it doesn't have to be as doom and gloom and chicken little as we think it is. It's just going to be an extra step you're going to have to make sure you look into. And unfortunately, if you're a high-end rider that carries DURA-ACE and ULTEGRA, you're kind of used to that anyway, in a sense, because, you know, you're really going to be tuned into your bike, and it's not one of those things you just buy and you ride it into the ground. You know, it's just one of those bikes that you definitely want to take in and be maintained. So that's the outcome of what I found out. This crank is fine. I'm going to put it back together and throw it back on to continue the process of working on that bike and making sure it's all fine-tuned and so forth. But yes, I'm going to have to disclose that bike, the detail, when I'm selling it, going, the crank's been checked. It's been, you know, recommended every 6 months to a year for the cranks to be checked. This is just how it is for if you want ULTEGRA 11 speed, which for the price for used, you're still going to be way cheaper and a minor annoyance from going forward. At least you know that if it does fail or crack, you're going to get another one. There's not an expiration on this. And that leads me to the last bit I want to talk about, is the old recall that they had back in the 90s, of like the C30s and the A90s, whatever, I can't remember, it's the A20 or 30s, cranksets who are on their mid-range stuff. They still do those today. They don't like it because they don't have the replacement cranks anymore, so they'll send out a new bottom bracket, crank, front derailleur to replace that whole front end drivetrain on a very low end, mid-range, very old used bike. And I have seen a few of these, and it just reminded me a couple years ago when I was a service manager at a bike shop in Ann Arbor, Wheels in Motion. I did come across one of those, and I was like, oh, you can send these in? And called up Shimano, and they're like, yeah, what's the crank arm length? All right, get this whole box of parts. And I'm like, that's crazy. You're still doing this after like 2 decades later. So the expiration on these is not going to expire. That's a lot of them. We'll see after a few years what the true numbers will be if they're ever released. But in this case, completely don't panic, but definitely go get it checked. Safety, and it doesn't cost you anything but a time and maybe a day that your bike is out of running commission, use on a rest day or whatever if you're that avid a rider. So not too bad, not horrible, not too bad. And the other bit is, if you do have a replacement at this stage of the game early, you're gonna have to wait for a new crank. It's gonna take some time. That's the painful part. Anywho, well, hopefully this helps to give some insights here. I'll probably have some follow-up videos on specifically this as well, and in addition to other things as, you know, it comes to fruitation. Hope you got some information there and kind of take the anxiety down a little bit. Still trust those bikes that are out there. Just make sure they're checked. That's all you need to do. This probably should have been done anyway, which I preach all the time. So safety first, people. There you go. You have it, the Shimano recall. Thanks for spending some time with me in the garage. I hope that it really helps. Stay tuned. And hey, if you like shirts like this, look below. You can get a coffee cup. Something's there. Taking scary ideas, one bike at a time, right? Anyway, thanks again. Until next time.